Women. What strange creatures they are. While on-the-nose pandering to gender stereotypes is present in most forms of entertainment, similarly to sports, the video game industry became one that was overwhelmingly seen as exclusively for boys. And in the first few decades of the industry, female players usually had to play as power fantasy characters that catered to men or over-sexualized female characters that also catered to men. Thankfully, while the gaming industry isn't perfect and women still face sexism from games themselves as well as fellow players, I think it's fair to say that gender inequality in video games isn't nearly as pervasive as it once was. It's been a long journey, but with the power of women, Princess Peach gained the rights she deserved. While everyone remembers fighting in the trenches during the 90s and shattering the glass ceiling in the 2010s, I think people often forget the awkward middle period that was the 2000s. A majority of games still centered around male player characters, but there was a greater inclusion of female characters beyond the princess that needed rescuing, and I think one of the best examples of this is Carmelita Fox in the Sly Cooper franchise. The Sly games have always featured mostly male characters. Normally, I wouldn't even make a point of that because that's pretty standard for games from the early 2000s, and because these characters' genders never mattered to me even as a young girl, since the adventures and struggles that they experienced weren't dependent on gender. In a lot of ways, I maintain that position today, as while I do think it's important to include female characters in media, many of the journeys male characters undergo are universal ones that I relate to and enjoy even if my gender isn't the same as theirs. But your gender does impact your life experiences on a biological and cultural level, and while I don't necessarily care if your chosen one protagonist is a man or a woman, there are certain stories and archetypes that are dependent on a character being female. So that's why I mentioned Sly's male-dominated cast and the aspect of gender in this video, because it's a significant factor in how Carmelita's character is portrayed. After all, she is the female love interest in a male-dominated game, an imaginary girlfriend created for the male players who project themselves onto Sly. Or maybe she's a little more than that. One of the strengths of the Sly franchise is how it takes existing conventions and builds on them in unique ways. At first glance, the games seem like your standard 3D platformers that were popular at the time, but the thieving and stealth elements really spark a chain reaction of creativity that improves the gameplay and sets it apart from its contemporaries. The protagonist Sly Cooper himself is an anti-hero in a modern setting that features a variety of unique levels inspired by real-world locations, helping to distinguish him from the usual fantastical creature in a fantasy setting trope. And these reinventions on the formula don't stop with Inspector Carmelita Fox, the hot-headed and just plain hot cop girlfriend for Sly to flirt with. Yet, the way her role grows beyond this simple archetype throughout the franchise is worth a dissection, and I think a perfect example of taking a seemingly one-dimensional female character and making her something more multifaceted. Carmelita makes a memorable entrance in Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus for a seemingly unmemorable character. She leaves a strong impression as a feisty inspector who won't give Sly an inch, but the cunning raccoon still walks circles around her with witty and often flirtatious banter. Still, most players assume that their relationship won't go beyond this love-hate dynamic, and Carmelita remains as a minor antagonist throughout the majority of Sly 1. But the writers drop some hints that there's more to her character than just a love interest slash violent, probably should be fired for misconduct, inspector. Carmelita confronts Sly during the Fire in the Sky episode, and the two exchange their usual expressions of affection.
Freeze, raccoon!
How can I freeze when my heart warms at the very...
Shut up, ringtail!
But buried beneath the cheesy back and forth, Sly starts to uncover a deeper issue between him and Carmelita. Sly makes the valid point that he's only trying to stop the Panda King's reign of terror in China, and that she should be focused on arresting him for his illegal reserve of explosives. Yet, Carmelita simply accuses Sly of confusing the issue and insists that all criminals are the same, and thus all of them must meet justice. Pew pew pew! She tries to blow you up again before you inevitably escape, and she angrily shakes her fist at you. Things continue on in the game as normal until the status quo is suddenly interrupted once again. Sly makes his way to his arch-nemesis Clockwork's lair in the final episode, The Cold Heart of Hate. Carmelita has been trapped by Clockwork, and despite Bentley's desire to let her get what's coming to her, Sly can't help but want to protect Carmelita from a terrible fate, even after all the times she's tried to capture him. Sly enters the chamber with Carmelita and is quickly knocked out when Clockwork activates poison gas, but Bentley uses his epic gamer hacking skills to save the day. And for once, Carmelita listens to Sly. She's confused by his noble act considering how long they've been mortal enemies, but Sly clarifies that Carmelita isn't his enemy. They're just on opposite sides of the law. Despite their different approaches, they decide to work together to defeat their common enemy of Clockwork, before Sly finally erases the hateful monster looming over his family's legacy once and for all. Asterisk on that, we'll talk about it later. Sly celebrates having retrieved his family heirloom of the Thievius Raccoonus, as well as Murray and Bentley for helping him along the way, only to be suddenly reminded that Carmelita Carmelita is waiting right behind him, ready to lock him up. Still, she had promised to give him a 10-second head start to evade his capture before they fought Clockwork, and she's staying true to her word. As Carmelita counts down the seconds, Sly simply stands there, not moving an inch. Why are you looking at her like that, Sly? Oh! After building up unspoken tension for so long, Sly finally makes his move on Carmelita, which I just have to share looks especially cute in the Japanese version of the ending cutscene. But despite this shocking twist, Sly and Carmelita know their roles, and the status quo is reinforced as he leaves her handcuffed to the volcanic island, starting the endless chase all over again. Geez, Sly, I hope that volcano doesn't erupt or Carmelita's dead. Clearly, you can surmise that Inspector Carmelita Fox has some more complexity than just a feisty love interest, but I don't blame you if you don't find it all that revolutionary. She has a very minor role in Sly 1, and her character arc is pretty hastily done. Just don't toss her aside yet. These ideas of a cop going beyond the fiery girlfriend and learning to truly love and understand a thief are only going to be further explored later in the franchise, and I really think they transform Carmelita into a special character amidst a cast dominated by men. Sly 2 Band of Thieves starts with another Paris operation that has the Cooper gang trying to steal the Clockwork parts, only to discover that they're missing from their supposed hiding spot. That's when Carmelita arrives, convinced that she's busted Cooper in the act, despite her partner Constable Neela's suggestions that the villainous Claw gang were probably the ones behind the operation. Still, Sly and Carmelita's rivalry boils as hot as ever, and he makes another quick escape as she sends shockwaves after him. Sly doesn't encounter Carmelita again until the A Starry-Eyed Encounter episode, although interestingly enough, he has a few run-ins with Neela, who recognizes that she and Sly have a common enemy in the Claw gang and is willing to secretly work with him if it stops them from rebuilding Clockwork. During the aptly named Tango with Carmelita mission, Sly dances with Carmelita at Rajan's ball, while Murray very inconspicuously makes his way towards the Clockwork wings. With Sly hiding under a fake identity, the two can actually enjoy each other's company, and Carmelita expresses interest in him. But the illusion is shattered once Rajan notices the missing wings and Sly makes his escape. It seems that Sly and Carmelita's possible future together is only a dream, blocked by their statuses as a deceptive thief and a law-abiding officer. In contrast, Sly and Neela continue to scheme together, as Neela gives him tips on the hiding place of the Clockwork heart so that he can investigate it for her and circumvent her requirement for a warrant. She even accepts his offer for a date, making it seem like Sly and Carmelita's relationship is all the more doomed. Except, Sly and Neela's relationship doesn't last very long. Actually, it goes down in flames. At the end of the episode The Predator Awakens, Neela hands over Sly, Murray, and Rajan in order to impress her superior, the Contessa, only to then frame Carmelita as conspiring with the Cooper gang by using a picture of her dancing with Sly. Bentley is shocked.
I can't believe it!
Even though Neela seemed to reject her label as a woman of the law and was willing to break boundaries when working with Sly, she turned out to be his enemy. Luckily, Bentley once again uses his epic gamer skills to save Sly and Murray from the Contessa. But when they return to capture her, Sly discovers something even more sinister happening within her castle. When the Cooper gang stole the Clockwork wings from Rajan, Carmelita discovered the Claw gang's secret operation in busting him, and now that she knows too much, the Contessa is brainwashing her to keep it all a secret. Sly is determined to save Carmelita, but Bentley reminds him there's not much he can do on his own and promises to rescue her when they take down the Contessa. And so they do, stealing back the Clockwork eyes as Neela arrests the Contessa for her illegal actions as an Interpol officer. Unfortunately, Carmelita's name still hasn't been cleared, and in a crazy moment for the game, Sly helps her escape the police. Unfortunately, their goodwill doesn't last for long, as Carmelita captures Murray during the A Friend in Need mission while the gang is hunting Jean Bisson in Canada. Bentley is initially terrified, but Sly assures him that he can easily track Carmelita to find Murray and she isn't a cruel captor, which actually proves to be true. We find out that Carmelita is only trying to capture the Cooper gang so that she can hopefully clear her name and earn a spot back at Interpol. Still, Sly's operation must go on, and they successfully acquire Clockwork's stomach. Carmelita is forced to run from the police again, but Sly starts to feel sympathy for her, determining that he'll have to clear her name without turning himself in, because without her, the chase just wouldn't be fun. You know, it's not like he actually cares about her or anything. Unfortunately, the Cooper gang's plans to recover all of the Clockwork parts are foiled when Jean Bisson raids their hideout, and they're forced to board Arpeggio's blimp and steal the parts back. During a confrontation with Arpeggio, it's revealed that Neela had been working with the Claw gang all along, using Sly to acquire the Clockwork parts from the other members so that they could assemble the beast himself. And further cementing her selfish nature, Neela even betrays Arpeggio to take control of Clockwork and obtain the chance at immortality. The Cooper gang begins enacting their plan to take down Clocla, only for Bentley to suddenly get a radio transmission from Carmelita, who agrees to work with the gang to stop Clocla from becoming immortal. Like in the last game, Carmelita recognizes a common enemy that she and Sly share that unites them beyond their divisions of cop and robber, and she helps the Cooper gang in their final mission. But it's the aftermath of this battle that marks an important turning point for Carmelita's character. The Cooper gang faces off against Clocla before finally laying waste to Clockwork's body. But as Neela says, there's no way they can destroy his parts without destroying the hate chip. As Clockwork explains in the first game, his deep jealousy of the Cooper's legacy is what allowed him to remain alive for so many years, with the sole purpose of serving as a hateful shadow over their lives. Sly holds the hate chip in his hands, only for Carmelita to arrive late on the scene. Having been unable to enact any revenge on Clocla before, Sly lets her be the one to destroy the hate chip, finally decaying Clockwork's parts and ending his hold over the Cooper clan. Sly remarks on how, well, remarkable this all is that Inspector Carmelita Fox, the legalistic cop who's been chasing him down across the world, is the one to defeat Clockwork and save his family. This seemingly boundary-breaking moment is quickly dashed when Carmelita informs the gang that they're all under arrest. Unfortunately, Bentley finds himself paralyzed after taking damage in the battle, and Murray is emotionally torn up over the whole experience. So Sly goes peacefully with Carmelita in exchange for his friend's escape. As Sly had hoped, Carmelita gets her name cleared and is welcomed back into Interpol. Despite this victory, neither of them are really sure what to do as they fly back to headquarters. But Carmelita soon realizes that she has no reason to antagonize Sly now that he's under arrest, and the two finally get a chance to talk freely, with Sly even describing it like a first date. Yet, even as they share their first moment of genuine connection beyond their labels as a thief and a cop, they soon fall back into their usual routine. It turns out Bentley and Murray were able to hijack the plane, giving Sly the opportunity to escape as the chase between him and Carmelita begins once again. Sly 2 is much more ambitious when it comes to the story than Sly 1, and it solidifies a lot of themes surrounding Carmelita's character and her relationship with Sly. Considering she's a side character, she gets a good amount of screen time in this game and goes on a unique journey that involves her own struggles of being betrayed by her trusted Interpol colleagues, while at the same time learning to trust the thieves who she's been playing cat and mouse with for years. Through this expanded role, Carmelita gets to play a bigger part in the franchise's overall commentary on societal labels and the expectations that come with carrying on a legacy. Interpol officers like Constable Neela and the Contessa, the supposed good guys that she could trust, ended up being secret Claude gang members who were only out for their own gain. Meanwhile, law-breaking thieves like the Cooper gang were crucial in helping her protect the public safety and take down dangerous criminals. The ending really hits this point home. In that moment of Carmelita destroying the hate chip and her talking with Sly in the helicopter, their societal labels and legacies didn't matter, and this commentary really makes their relationship more meaningful than a shoehorned love interest for the protagonist to win over. Still, Sly isn't ready to let go of his life as a thief. Considering he's devoted his whole life to protecting the Cooper legacy, I'm sure he'd need a very significant reason to convince him to leave it all behind. Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves opens with Sly literally reflecting on his life as a descendant of master thieves during an encounter with Dr. M's monster after a failed attempt to break into the Cooper vault, a hiding place for all of the treasures his ancestors had stolen over the years. As we enter his flashback, we soon find ourselves in another encounter with Carmelita, as Sly agreed to distract the cops so that his old enemy Dimitri could escape in exchange for fighting Murray, who left the group out of a feeling of responsibility for Bentley's paralyzation. It quickly becomes clear to the player that Sly and Carmelita are back to their old habits as we head through another chase scene reminiscent of the previous two games' openings. For the rest of the An Opera of Fear episode, you don't really encounter Carmelita until you get to the best mission of the game where Sly and Bentley protect Carmelita and fight off the Blue Viper mob in a gondola chase. I was obsessed with this minigame as a kid. I would sit there for hours replaying the mission over and over again, zooming my gondola through the canals and letting Bentley unleash his rage on the machine gun. Great childhood memories. Anyway, in the aftermath of the mission, Bentley expresses his frustration with being forced to help the enemy, and Sly tries his best to create a more practical argument as to why helping Carmelita is a net positive, but Bentley's not having any of it.
That and you've got a thing for her.
And I've got a thing for her. Look.
Admittedly, Carmelita does become an important part of their operation in Venice, with the player even getting to control her during the turf war mission, as she inadvertently helps Sly against a common enemy. After defeating Octavio, the next canonical appearance of Carmelita is during the Goodbye My Sweet bonus short, and at first I wasn't going to mention it because it treads the same ground concerning Sly and Carmelita's relationship, but I do feel the need to highlight this employee's comments hidden in the newspaper clipping. It's funny because I don't really like apples, but you know what? That doesn't matter. I still enjoy apple juice. especially when I snack on pretzels. I sure am glad I have all my Christmas shopping done for the year. I can't believe that it's only a few days away, and that I'll be working on this cutscene over my break. Lame. The gang really sees no sign of Carmelita during the Rumble Down Under episode until the final mission. While attempting to enact their master plan of coating Murray's stomach in shiny oil so that it looks like a moon and using him to lure the ancient mask of Dead Earth, whose sworn enemy is the moon spirit. This episode is really good, guys. Carmelita arrives on the scene to arrest them, only for the mask to latch onto her instead and turn her into a giant. Sly then proceeds to climb up the side of her pants to get to the mask. You know, let's all just pretend this was a bad dream. The gang helps her after she falls unconscious, and they leave her some photos before heading back on the run. Throughout the rest of Sly 3, Carmelita tracks the gang only to inadvertently help them here and there before swooping in at the end to clean up the criminals. During the 5th episode, Dead Men Tell No Tales, Carmelita doesn't even show up to try arresting everyone at the end. She's oddly absent from the game, and yet, as we flash back to the present after Sly's reflected on his journey up to this point, his thoughts wander back to Carmelita, and more importantly, the relationship that he was too afraid to pursue. Things are looking grim for Sly as he's crushed by Dr. M's mutated monster and the weight of his regrets about the life he never pursued, only for a hero to arrive in the form of Carmelita. Backed by mercenaries, Carmelita confronts Dr. M and takes out his monster, saving Sly in the process as Bentley and the others transport him back to their ship. After Sly recovers, the gang is able to retrieve his cane and finally get him inside the famous Cooper vault. This moment is a culmination of everything Sly has been working for throughout the whole franchise. Reassembling the Thievius Raccoonist, destroying Clockwork once and for all, accessing his family heirlooms, they're all for the sake of protecting his legacy as a Cooper, a legendary thief, the exact label that kept him from living a meaningful life with Carmelita. Sly has his final confrontation in the Cooper vault with Dr. M, a former Cooper gang member who felt he was constantly overshadowed by the fame of Sly's father. This makes him the perfect representative of the damaging nature of the Cooper's obsession with their family name, and gives Sly a chance to realize that he is his own person that doesn't have to live under the shadow of his ancestors. As she often does, Carmelita makes a dramatic entrance at the end of this battle. It's a scene familiar to all of the Sly games, as Carmelita triumphantly boasts about sending all of the criminals to jail and exchanges flirty banter with Sly, but it soon takes an unexpected turn. In an attempt to spite Sly before his death, Dr. M launches an attack at Carmelita, but Sly shouts that he won't let him hurt her and dashes in front of the shot, sacrificing himself for her sake. It then falls on Carmelita to take down Dr. M, and similarly to the battle with Clockla, she saves her sworn enemies from their greatest enemy. Carmelita runs to Sly, who's just gaining consciousness and seemingly doesn't remember anything about where or who he is. When he asks Carmelita, she thinks for a moment before saying he's her partner at Interpol. Sly agrees to escape with her, and the two make it out of the Cooper vault before it collapses. The last cutscene of the game is told from Bentley's perspective. He and Murray watch as Cane Island collapses in on itself, having a bittersweet moment to reflect on all of the hard work they put into uncovering Sly's family fortune, only for it all to be hidden once again and Sly nowhere to be found. After reassembling the gang, they discover Sly's calling card and cane leading to the Cooper treasure, and as months go by without contact, it seems that Sly has left behind his days as a Cooper for good. With no Cooper gang left, Bentley and Murray pursue their own paths in life, with Murray getting into racing and Bentley starting a new lab with his girlfriend Penelope. As the credits roll, Bentley informs us of the fates of the rest of the Cooper gang members, and the screen fades to black. But there's still one scene left. Watching from the rooftops, Bentley scans the horizon of buildings before settling on a balcony, where Sly and Carmelita stand holding each other's hands. Sly turns back and gives the camera a wink before the game ends. The reason that this ending feels so perfect isn't because you won the game and got the girl, but because Sly and Carmelita's relationship is more important than that. They spent their whole lives playing the roles of cop and robber, trying to achieve superficial goals that didn't really matter, when what both truly made them happy was to live a meaningful life together. It reflects the Sly franchise's overall theme of the expectations that come with upholding a legacy, and how you can break free from this pressure to become your own person. Carmelita, despite being a side character who initially seemed to only serve the role as a fictional girlfriend to appeal to male audiences, ended up playing an important part in this theme, and was crucial to the franchise having such a satisfying conclusion. Throughout the series, her black and white understanding of police and thieves is consistently challenged and transformed, before she finds herself essentially working with the Cooper gang by taking down their greatest enemies. In a more male-centric series like Sly Cooper, it's great to see how they transform the female character into a fun antagonist and eventual ally, with a memorable presence in the game who gets to meaningfully contribute to the gameplay as well as the story's overall message. Man, the more I look at Honor Among Thieves, the more I realize what a neatly wrapped up with a bow on top kind of ending it was. But it's not technically the ending, because 8 years later, newcomer game development studio Sansuru Games took up the mantle of the Sly franchise and released Sly 4: Thieves in Time. With a new studio and console to develop for, this game came with a lot of changes to the Sly formula. Some good, like the creative gameplay and high-definition art style, and some bad, like the characters and overall writing. And I mean, right from the onset, Sly is already acting very out of character and completely screwing over that perfect ending that I talked about earlier. Sly catches the player up on his relationship with Carmelita and how they're finally able to be with each other as he pretends he has no memory of his past as a thief, but despite finally having his happily ever after, his life with Carmelita that he sacrificed his entire legacy for, Sly just goes, I'm gonna steal something now for absolutely no reason. The game doesn't even try to explain it beyond the fact that he wants to. And in the end, it really doesn't matter because Bentley shows up 30 seconds later to ask him to help save the thievius raccoonus from being erased from time. I don't understand why the writers couldn't have just led with this reason to force Sly back into thieving instead of making him look like an ungrateful idiot who doesn't care about Carmelita anymore, and it sets a bad precedent for how the game will handle their relationship. We get another opening heist scene that's become a standard in the series. The Cooper gang travels through Paris, breaks into the museum to steal the artifact needed to power the time machine, and almost gets caught by Carmelita at the last second before escaping. Except this time, the flirty love-hate banter between Sly and Carmelita is undercut with the fact that she's just discovered he's been lying to her about his amnesia for years, and now their relationship is completely destroyed. Yeah, it's kind of hard to return to the status quo when the ending of the previous game was completely about discontinuing the status quo. Carmelita is absent from the Turning Japanese episode, and there really isn't much thought given to her besides Sly hoping she's okay, like he didn't just abandon her after completely breaking her trust, but suddenly, she's back. Sly's rootin' cowboy ancestor Tennessee finds Carmelita being sent off the edge of a cliff by Toothpick before rescuing her just in time. The rest of the Cooper gang comes to check on her, but Toothpick uses it as an opportunity to kidnap them, and the player must control both of the sharpshooters in the jailbreak mission to save Sly, Murray, and Bentley. Carmelita then explains how after Sly robbed the museum in Paris, she examined the crime scene and discovered the big bad of the game that was erasing Sly's ancestry from time, the Paradox, who then transported her to the Old West. Sly does his best to apologize about the whole situation, but his attempts aren't all that great and Carmelita does not have any patience for it. She even starts devoting her affections to his ancestor Tennessee, supposedly just to spite him. I mean, your girlfriend passing you up for your great-great-great-great-grandfather is pretty brutal. Carmelita helps the gang in their plan to take down Toothpick, taking part in a shooting contest where a creepy fox harasses her and forces her to kiss him if she loses. At the beginning of the Clan of the Cave Raccoon episode, the Cooper gang accidentally travels to the Stone Age, and Carmelita storms off despite Sly's attempts to make amends. Again, she's gone for most of the episode, until the Duty Calls mission, where she shows up to give Sly the codes to the Grizz's base after he failed to collect them. During a cutscene, Carmelita delivers the codes to Bentley while also reflecting on her conflict with Sly, having had time to think after investigating the Grizz on her own for a while. She admits that she knew deep down Sly had kept his thieving ways, but forced herself to believe that he'd become a law-abiding citizen. Still, like in the past games, she recognizes that they have the common enemy in the Paradox and both fight for good, just using different methods, and reluctantly joins with the gang to take him down. During the Mechanical Menace mission, Carmelita is randomly watching out for Sly's medieval ancestor Gallus, even though he has arguably a much bigger ego than Sly, evidenced by the fact that this entire mission is to slay a mythical moat monster that isn't even related to the task at hand. But apparently, he's very sweet, and so Carmelita, being the famously kind and gentle person she is, decides to help him out, serving as a big oof for Sly. Anyway, we get through the stupid, dumb, idiotic Penelope villain twist reveal, which I actually have a video about in case you're interested, and Carmelita leads the final operation of the episode in Bentley's place. Also, I just gotta note that after Penelope steals Gallus' cane and goes to lock the gates, Carmelita shoves Sly into the castle before they can fall. You know, just passive-aggressively sending him directly into the line of fire. Like, she could have at least dove forward and shoved them both in, considering her shock pistol would be pretty useful against a giant robot, but I guess simping for all of Sly's ancestors has made her soft. Leading into the next episode, Carmelita conveniently grabbed a gold coin from the museum that allows them to travel to ancient Arabia. She basically does nothing for the whole episode until being summoned to provide crucial help in the final mission by doing a sexy belly dance to distract the guards, while Sly and the gang take an excruciatingly long time to open a door. Bentley, please stop forcing Carmelita to do something uncomfortable and just let Murray do it. He'd be really good at it. Hey, way to incorporate those motion controls. On this day, women's rights were revoked. Anyway, like it has in the past missions, the Cooper gang's plan fails again and Paradox arrives to complete his collection of the Cooper canes, kidnapping Carmelita in the process. Both groups travel back to modern-day Paris, and Sly finds Carmelita tied up inside of Paradox's blimp in an obvious trap that he's quickly captured by. Sly and Carmelita yell at Paradox for a bit as he monologues about his plan to trap them in a time prison until they seemingly waste away inside a small capsule in an admittedly horrific plan. Luckily, Bentley and Murray arrive just in time with Tennessee, who shoots Sly and Carmelita free before heading back to his timeline. Paradox then stupidly opens his own time portal on accident, and the whole blimp starts coming apart as it's sucked into the vortex. As Paradox gets sucked into the portal, Bentley insists that everyone leaves before they fall to the same fate, but Sly says he needs to finish off Paradox for good to protect the Cooper clan. I thought we were kinda done with this legacy stuff and now enjoying our own independence free of societal labels. Okay, Carmelita and Sly affirm their apparently renewed love for each other before Sly heads into the vortex to defeat Paradox. The two end up getting transported back to Paris and confronting each other on the burning blimp. During their dialogue scene, it seems like the game keeps getting close to the franchise's central theme of legacy with Paradox. Both his father and Sly's father were targeting a famous gem to steal, but when Sly's father got away with the treasure first, it left Paradox's father to take the blame for the crime and ruined his career. Much like clockwork, Paradox became so jealous of the Coopers and obsessed with fixing his own failed legacy that he wanted to erase them from time to ensure that his family was remembered instead. But for some reason, when Sly asks Paradox if he did this because of what happened to his dad, Paradox is like, "No, Cooper, I do not care about my father or erasing the Coopers," even though I think that was like the main premise of the game, but like I don't care. I want the canes because if I have the canes, then that means I am the greatest thief of all time, because you see, the Coopers are the greatest thieves of all time, and if I have their canes, then I'm very good, you see. Excellent idea, Bentley, and just to ensure it's foolproof, I'm going to use my...
No, Sly, don't say it!
French accent. Oh, oui, oui, baguette, mon ami, Emmanuel Macron, mon amour. The way that they keep dancing around this idea of becoming over-obsessed with your family name makes me think that the writers didn't actually intend for this theme in the first place, and accidentally almost made a main antagonist that connects with the whole franchise. Alright, this really doesn't have anything to do with Carmelita, but I think it is indicative of Sly 4's overall failure to understand Sly's character and the messages of the previous games. Which, like, how do you miss it? It's a pretty simple and often blatantly communicated message. Okay, so Sly basically dies after defeating Paradox in a climactic and truly epic quick time event. Paradox is left hanging from the edge of the blimp. Sly considers finishing him off, but Paradox is like, "No, Cooper, I do not wish to fall on the ground and land in a big splat, and then I will be dead, and that would be very sad, très triste, oh pauvre moi. Oh, Sly Cooper!" And Sly's like, "Well, I guess I shouldn't murder people. I guess now the cartoon violence that the ESRB ratings so thoughtfully warned us about is actually real violence? I mean, Sly's murdered or at least allowed villains to die before. Even in Sly 4, he put Toothpick inside an active train engine. Still, he begrudgingly helps Paradox, only for him to steal the parachute off his back like Sly isn't a master pickpocket who could see that coming. Sly then delivers this dramatic vengeance line as Paradox escapes.
You won't get away with this. I'll find you.
But oops, he gets hit by a plane and falls to his death anyway. But he doesn't even die. He lands in the river and gets sent to jail. Now Sly is left without a parachute and ends up getting stranded in Egypt, question mark, for no reason.
Sending Sly to ancient Egypt.
finally provides us with the game's epilogue, revealing that while they've saved the Cooper ancestry, everyone is working hard to be ready for Sly's return. Carmelita has been conducting her own investigations in secret, seemingly the most affected by his disappearance, even if she doesn't want to admit it. I still don't know why they did this cliffhanger ending unless a sequel was already greenlit. You just can't count on that. It really pales in comparison to Sly 3's conclusion, and now Carmelita's character is left in a weird place. Sly 4's interpretation of Carmelita is admittedly more of a mixed bag than outright terrible, but the way that they downgraded her feels even more frustrating because I think they had the opportunity to do some really cool things with her character. It seems like the game wants Carmelita to have that snappy back and forth with Sly that she had in the previous games, but it also wants to give weight to her anger about him breaking her trust, and so their dynamic is unfortunately pretty rough to watch, more like petty exes than flirty rivals. The game also keeps doing this thing where Carmelita instantly falls in love with all of Sly's ancestors, except for Bob and Salim because that would be too weird, and she seemingly uses it as a way to make Sly miserable as he mopes about losing his girlfriend to his grandparents. In some ways, I appreciate that Carmelita gets to be genuinely upset with Sly for doing something like that, and she's allowed to have a deeper examination of their relationship, but in other ways, it feels like a less enjoyable rehash of her journey in the previous games. Thieves in Time also definitely had a negative impact on women's rights, as misogyny reportedly increased by 42.8% immediately after the game's release. To act like the original Sly trilogy's Carmelita was a feminist statement is an exaggeration, and she still plays into the angry woman stereotype as Sly's girlfriend character. But many of her surface level flaws were countered by her more three-dimensional character arc, and looking at her different renditions is where we see the difference between an attractive female character and an over-sexualized female character. From the onset, Carmelita's design in Sly 4 is egregiously sexualized. She went from a somewhat revealing bralette covered up by a coat, pants, and high boots to a literal sticky bra, tight miniskirt, and medieval peasant-looking boots. Her hourglass figure has gone from athletic to anorexic with an impossibly small waist between big boobs and hips. Additionally, the way Sly 4 treats her character is more overtly sexualized than the previous games. The flirty comments towards Carmelita were mostly reserved for Sly, which felt like harmless jokes rather than creepy oversteps, and were even validated when they decided to pursue a relationship together. And overall, any possible sexist treatment of Carmelita was too minor and lighthearted to leave a sour taste in your mouth. Despite the fact that Thieves in Time was released in 2013, it somehow feels less progressive in its treatment of Carmelita. Getting to play as her as a hideout character as well as in multiple missions is an awesome addition, but it's disappointing when a good number of her missions revolve around her crushing on one of Sly's ancestors, despite them being hopelessly full of themselves like Sly, or having to play into the advances of creepy men to get what she wants. She feels much more like a woman character in a bad way, where most of her actions and motivations revolve around other men that she shouldn't really even care about. Do I think it's going to erase women from existence because of its sheer awfulness? Maybe, but it's just one of those instances where you can feel it crossing the line from lighthearted teasing to something more uncomfortable. Again, I think the thing that makes me most frustrated about it is the missed potential. We're in the 2010s, the gaming industry has become more mainstream overall, so there's more money and more space for women that the original Sly trilogy didn't have. I wish Thieves in Time gave us the opportunity to see Sly and Carmelita working together as a couple for the first time instead of constantly fighting before sharing a brief romantic moment at the end. If they had just changed the inciting incident a bit, it could have changed the course of the entire game for good. Maybe they could have had Bentley ask for Sly's help to save the Cooper family before he decides to steal anything, and Sly reluctantly confides in Carmelita about the issue, admitting the truth about his fake amnesia. Carmelita could be understandably mad, but as she even says in Thieves in Time, she knew deep down something was up and just didn't want to admit it. So she slowly warms up to helping Sly steal the artifact because of their love for each other. This would be a really cool moment for Carmelita to put her black and white conception of cops and robbers behind her once and for all, and a satisfying way to resolve her character arc. We could also see Sly and Carmelita truly work together for the first time, which is the happy ending fans wanted to see. It's not like Thieves in Time is afraid of radically changing characters. I mean, just look at Penelope. And this change wouldn't feel like an out of left field character choice for Carmelita, but a payoff for the years of build-up getting her to accept that Sly's not just a rotten criminal. It's not completely horrible, but pretty disappointing considering the possibilities Sansaru had to work with. Well, at least we got Grey Griffin voicing Carmelita. She's always a nice addition. Speaking of, why did Carmelita have to change her voice every single game? I think Alessia Glidewell in Sly 2 is probably my favorite. And not to drop a hot take right at the end of the video, but Ruth Levere in Sly 3 is definitely the worst. Okay, bye!